Welcome back, guys. Our adjunct instructor at Manor, David Travasky, is going to make our next introduction for our wonderful speakers. Again, we are so grateful for the time you took to come and share this with us today.
And for those of you who are students of Mary Sims, I'm covering for her because Mary is home with COVID. So we are passing the torch. And I'm not going to talk long. I am proud to be an adjunct at Manor. I love working with my students here. But what's really exciting is the kinds of opportunities that you guys get because of your professors. And what we're going to do is way of doing it is sort of a multiple introduction. I'm going to introduce you to my neighbor. And you're going to say, well, what's your neighbor got to do with this story? My neighbor, Mike Santarelli, is a retired homicide detective, first from Cheltenham and then from the Montgomery County. And when he retired, one of the projects that he did was he worked for the Innocence Project. And back in 2015, I'll never forget this. I'm sitting at my house and Mike tells me that he just got a file about a murder from Chester. And I grew up in Swarthmore, which is 3 miles and 100 light years from Chester in terms of socioeconomic differences and values and things like that. And so Mike, I was fascinated by it and we talked to a minute or two and he went home. An hour later, he came over and he said, this file, this case, it's all wrong. He basically knew after an hour that this was a wrong conviction. And that was the case of Leroy Evans. And so I'm going to ask Mike to introduce our two speakers today who are going to tell you that story. My neighbor, Michael Santarelli, who was the investigator in this case. Mike, please come up.
Hello. So as David told you, he's my neighbor, and we've been neighbors for a long time. I got involved in this case actually through a mutual friend, David, Marissa Bluestein, who was was at the time the head of the Innocence Project. And I had done some consulting with her on smaller cases from other states, actually, even. But then I get a call one day from Mike Malloy, who's going to speak to you momentarily, asking me if I'd be interested to weigh in on a case that he was looking at, Leroy Evans, on a wrongful conviction. So we met a couple times, and then I ultimately read the trial transcripts from the trial. And immediately within an hour, there were so many problems with the way the case was handled and presented that I said to Mike, we need to go full speed ahead on this because this should have never happened. Leroy should have never been in jail. If they would have done their job properly, this wouldn't have happened. So that's how I got involved in this. And it's been a pleasure to be part of the team that helped get Leroy out of jail. So I'm now going to introduce Mike Malloy, who was the lawyer who represented Leroy in this matter.
Good afternoon. Thank you for inviting me, and certainly thank you on behalf of Leroy and Rosemary, first and foremost. As Mike indicated, this case came to me in about 2000, was it 13, 14, 15? Yeah. And it's really hard to describe the journey, to be honest with you. So Leroy is in jail at that point, going on 40 years. So keep in mind, so when I contact Mike, that's 8 years ago, and Leroy just got out in this year. So it took 8 years for something that was obvious to me and obviously to Mike. And it came to me because I was at Delaware County Prison seeing other clients, and Leroy is there visiting somebody, and he asked to come see me. You know, before I left, he said, "Can I see the lawyer over there?" And he talks to me for maybe about 20 to 30 minutes. And so I go home that night and I tell my wife, you know, where I was, what happened. But I said, I met this guy in prison. And I said, I'm telling you, there's something going on with this guy. I didn't know much about the case, quite frankly, at all. But I said, there's something about the guy. It bothers me. I had no idea about the case. So 8 years later, and literally a room of boxes come our way. But there was something about him, quite frankly, that resonated with me. And And so at that point, I'm in. And as I said to Leroy and to a lot of my clients, if I pick a fight, I'll finish the fight. I never realized it was going to be this long of a fight. I'll tell you that much right now. And I had the same, I guess, problem that Mike had when he finally read the file. So I read the trial, right? And I read the trial. And the facts of the case were, back then, this was a very famous case. I'm just starting to practice law in 1980. And it's a big case back then. It's called the Avon lady murder case. It had the right ring to it, everything. And it was, pretty big news everywhere. And the trial was basically saying that a fellow by the name of Anthony Jones was his main witness against him. And he said that Leroy had lured the Avon lady down to Jones's house. And when they came into the house, the long and short of it is that somewhere along the line, Leroy took a rope out of his pocket, put it around Mrs. Leo's neck, tried to strangle her onto the floor. And then when she's on the floor, he takes an iron, this is the testimony now, and he beats her with the iron. And it's a bloody murder scene. He literally beats her with an iron. And so I'm reading the trial, and when I read things like that, I little mark things on the side or make little notes, and I keep writing, where's the blood? And I'm reading about what they get, the DA is calling it a bloody crime scene. Police are calling it a bloody crime scene, but I don't see any blood anywhere. So I keep thinking somewhere along the line, somebody's going to mention, where's the blood? There's no blood at this crime scene. There's not a drop of blood at this bloody crime scene. So the next question I have is, where's the iron? This is a case that went to trial. There's no photo of any blood. There's no iron. That makes no sense to me, right? I mean, like, no matter how they, and by the way, the police were on the scene roughly about 40 minutes after the event occurred. So not a whole lot of time to clean up. And so that made no sense at all. There has to be blood somewhere. And there has to be a trail of blood somewhere. And if you think about the beating going with an iron, there's got to be blood on the ceiling, there's got blood everywhere. Not one drop of blood, and more importantly, there's no iron. And so that tells me there's a problem in this case. And so as it unfolds, I reach out into Marissa Bluestein, who's working on the Innocent Project, and I tell her I've got this case, and she recommends Mike as my investigator. And so off we go. But what happens is he being Leroy, had filed a petition to have his DNA examined, because the biggest problem in wrongful convictions is time. It's time. Back then, when he was in jail, you had 60 days to file a new claim that you filed after discovered evidence. So you found something new. You only had 60 days to file it. Now, remember, most of these individuals are incarcerated. So the ability that they can even get out to get somebody to look into it, find the information 60 days later. Now it's 1 year, but still only 1 year. And time is everything. I get calls all the time from people. I had one last week. They're out of time. They're long out of time, meaning you could come in, you could be perfectly innocent, but you're a day late. No judge can take that case. The exception for him was when he filed this when he filed it in 2015, he had asked for DNA. There was an exception to come in if, when your crime occurred, DNA testing didn't exist. So there was an open window to come in and examine DNA. So he files this petition on his own from prison, and he's given a court-appointed lawyer. And be frank, that sat for a year. Nothing happened at all. I mean, unfortunately, the system works that the court-appointed lawyer gets only so much per diem, and they're not really going to deep dive into the case. But what he's asked for in the DNA is that at trial, Jones had also testified that when Leroy was kneeling over her, beating her with the iron, that the lady scratched him. And at trial, he had what appeared to be, well, the DA appeared to be a scratch, but what he and Rosemary said was basically he had had a pimple that she had popped. But they still said that's the scratch. So he asked for DNA of Mrs. Leo's fingernails with the understanding that they would find someone else's DNA, that she had scratched somebody else. and therefore that would exonerate him. So we found that I think 8 of the 10 fingernails. They were still in existence. And so before we got any further, however, I had reached out to Anthony Jones. He was incarcerated for the murder. And I reached out to him and asked if he would talk to me. So, and some time goes by, I'm driving in my car and I get a call from him. And he says, you know, he called me and I said to him, I only have 2 questions. You know, I only have 2 questions. You know, I don't want to push my luck. You know, I said, did Leroy Evans have anything to do with this? And he says, no. And I said to him, can I come and talk to you? And he said, yeah. So up I go to SCI Forest, which literally is God's country. They have one red light in the whole county. And that's where he is. So I go up and fortunately I take a court reporter with me. I get a court reporter to come with me. And he gives me 93 pages at the end of the day of what really happened. And what really happened was he had been with his girlfriend the night before and saw the Avon lady at a showing. And back then, the Avon lady would be carrying cash. You know, we weren't carrying credit cards or PayPal or anything of that nature. He saw the cash. And so he then just basically called her the next morning to ask if she would come to a demonstration. Now, again, at trial, there's a phone number in Mrs. Leo's book and an address. The address matches Jones's house. The phone number doesn't. So keep that in mind, because what happens later on, when I say to him, what about the phone number? He goes, that's a fake phone number I used. So nobody could call me. So Jones says, so she comes into the house at that point in time. And he just really wants to rob her, you know. But she doesn't know that, and she's coming in with her brochures, and he got nervous, and so she's standing up, and he's just got nervous. He panicked, and he just cold cocked her, and when he cold cocked her, down on the floor she went, and that really turns out later to be the fatal blow, because basically she had a subdural hematoma at that point in time, and she's bleeding internally at that point in time. But what happens to her, according to him, is she wakes up, which is going to happen in those type of injuries. You know, you're going to regain consciousness and go back out again, but you're dying at that point in time. So she wakes up. He then has a rope, and then he strangles her to death. He thinks he strangled her to death. Now, let's stop at the rope for a second. Remember, he had said at trial that Leroy, for whatever reason, had a piece of rope in his pocket. And that's where because she was found with a rope around her neck later. That's the rope that he had in his pocket. We find when we're investigating this case, we find, in fact, the rope still around, but more importantly, the day of the murder, 20, 30 minutes after the murder occurred, when the police came into the house to execute a search warrant, some officer had noticed that a piece of the backyard rope, the clothesline of Jones's house, had been recently torn. They took that rope, matched it to the rope around the lady's neck, completely the opposite of what the testimony was. So they knew in 1981, when the trial was going on, they had a piece of rope that matched Jones's backyard. And he says, no, Evans came in the house with the rope. So he tells me that he takes the rope and he thinks then that she's dead. So what he does then is he drags her out to the trash can in his backyard, but she's not bleeding. Keep that in mind. You know, very little bleeding, and he literally drags her up to an empty lot, and at the empty lot, he's dumping the body out. At that point, he thinks I'm gotten away with it. You know, I'm just going to leave it at the empty lot. Nobody's going to know that she even came here. All that type of stuff. She wakes up again. Because that's going to happen in that type of injury. So when she wakes up this time, the first thing she says, and there's a record of it, that she says, I know you. He then starts taking the rocks and bricks that are in the lot, and then he beats her around the head. Okay, and so it's a pretty vicious murder. And from a sensational point of view, from a public interest point of view, you know, it's got the Avon lady murder case, and you know, you have this vicious beating, and to be blunt, what was happening in the city at that point in time, the city of Chester, it was a city in racial transformation. It was primarily a white working class city, pre-war, and post-war. because of the great migration of all the African Americans that had come up from the South, working at Sun Ship now, there was a more and more growing Black population coming in. And so from the paper's point of view, and quite frankly, from the public's point of view, this was a white woman, a well-liked white woman. Husband was a vet. Everybody in the neighborhood liked it. I mean, she had no differences between the Black customers and the white customers. And two young Black people beat her to death viciously. The biggest fear you had, right, of when this transformation has happened, who's moving into my neighborhood? Two young Black people who kill you, who kill white women. That's how we go to trial in that case. He also tells me, though, he continues to tell me that that what happened, and then he says to me, he's telling me that the money, and he says, and he's just telling me a story. He says, and that's when they took the money. I said, who took the money? He said, they found the money. He said, they found the money upstairs in my mother's jewelry box. And I said, they didn't find any money. He said, yeah, they found money. I said, I'm telling you, I read everything. They didn't find any money. Because that was another problem I had. He had said at trial that Leroy had taken the purse with the money, walked out with it, and came back and gave the empty purse back, right? So again, I mark up on the side, like, who brings the purse back empty, okay? And who never bought, nobody ever asked Jones, did he tell you where the money was? Did he tell you the amount of the money? When they arrested Leroy, nobody asked what happened to the money. Nobody asked. I would think that's pretty obvious. This is clearly a robbery murder. And she's down there with money. But according to him, Leroy took the money, put it somewhere. That big question I have, what I write 10 times. Where the hell's the money? Where's the blood? Where's the iron? Where's the money? And when he says to me, they took the money, and I said to him, no, they didn't. And he said, yes, they did. He said the cops came in with a search warrant, and when they were going through the house, what was his name? Maurice. Maurice. Last name. Green. That's what's Green. Yeah, Robert. Maurice Green, who is Jones's mother's boyfriend. He's actually in the house doing a search warrant. Mike Santorelli will tell you that should never happen. It's a search warrant going on. So when they're going through, I read a report now later. There's a report out there that says when one of the officers was going through, he opened up this box, and on top, opened up the box, there was crumpled clothes on top, and underneath there were crumpled dollar bills. And Maurice just said, that's family money. And the officer gave the robbery money to Mr. Green, and he walked out with it. So nobody thought for a second that there's a robbery of an Avon lady who's only working in cash. Nobody asked where the cash was, and they find hidden money crumpled up. And Jones said to me, that's where the money was. And so at that point in time, I have to come back. I think I hit a home run, right? Sounds like I got a home run. I got so much evidence. Huh? So two things happen. I have to come back, and I first go back and tell Leroy, and he's in Delaware County Prison. And so I go out and tell him, I think it's great news, but and so then he starts getting angry at me, saying, no. He didn't do it alone. There's two guys. I'm looking for the fingernails. And I'm saying to him, no, there's no second guy. And he said, no. I'm telling you. And I said, no, there's no second guy. I convinced him. There's no second guy. It's not that he just tells me he did it alone. There's evidence to say he did it alone. And I'll also tell you that at that point in time, he's always been the most positive person you're ever going to meet, really. I mean, really. It's like Winnie the Pooh. He's just positive. And so I wanted to temper him down because, that probably was maybe 2016. And I had to temper him down, knowing how the system works. That doesn't mean a whole lot. They're just not going to open the door and say, I'm sorry. It's not going to happen. And he's only cried in my presence twice, and that was one of them. And he just hit him that, what may happen to him. I said to him, I can't promise you'll ever get out in your lifetime. I then leave there and go down to the family. Now this family, it's hard to describe this family. it's huge. They're everywhere. And they're all like him. I mean, so I go down to mom's house, his mother's house, and I go in and I tell them the story. That I'm telling them the whole story. Man, they're not happy with me at all. They got the wrong lawyer. They're saying no, 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 and they're giving me names of who the second person is. They know who the second person is. And do you know how they know who the second person is? Because the lawyer that they hired in 1980 had told them that he knew who the second person was, and that he was always going to get him. And he was going to, I'm talking to people who know him. I'm going to bring him in. I know who the second person is. And, and you're in his situation, in the family situation, right? You buy into that. There was never a second person. The lawyer at the time, we're talking working class people who have come up from the South, that level of income. That lawyer was $25,000 in 1980. That's a lot of money in 1980. That's a lot of money for this family to put together back in 1980. And I can tell you, when I have several things when I read the trial, the things I told you about, but when I would read it, it was clear to me that that lawyer had taken the $25,000, had sold them a bill of goods about the second person. And it was also clear to me that he looked at that file as he was trying the case. Because repeatedly throughout the whole trial, he would say something, he would say an objection saying, I didn't get that in discovery. And the DA would say, no, I have a letter, I sent it to you. And then he'd go, oh, I found it. He never found it. He wasn't looking for it. He was one of an old school lawyer who just kind of gave me the cash and I can wing it in the courtroom like a theater piece. And at $25,000, the same family, when he loses, pays another lawyer $25,000 for the appeal. $50,000 in 1980, 1981. It's a massive amount of money. And but when I'm down there with Alice and the family, I finally convince them. It takes me, I'm arguing like I'm arguing with a case. No. But now they've had almost 40 years of being told they're looking for the second guy, and they're ecstatic that he's coming down to get the fingernails and the DNA of the second guy. They think that the prison doors are going to open. Because we know the second guy is, they had names. It wasn't that they were just going to now have to go through a database. They had names of who it was. Because Mr. Marcone had said it was this guy and that guy and this guy. So they had names. And now I'm telling them, he's wrong. You're all wrong. And it took a little while to convince them of that. But that's what happened. So now, right, we're in court. We're in court for the DNA only at this point in time. So I got, and believe it or not, I've got a time issue I've got to be conscious of. Because at that point, I was still in the 60 days, right? And so, to be perfectly blunt, I was outside of the 60 days. Nobody asked me. Nobody asked me, and so because we started arguing. I got the statement in, I got the recording and all in. And how I got that recording and all, and the time of that recording and all that kind of stuff, nobody really asked me, how much contact. And I waited for that question forever because, I have to answer the court correctly. And at one point, the court came close to asking that question, but I was able to try to steer my way out of it, and without violating any ethics codes. But that's how serious that could be. And as Mike told you, I'm a sole practitioner. So in this case is obviously getting bigger. And to show you, I guess, to me, on how clear his innocence was, when I asked Marisa, for somebody who could help me, she gives me Mike's name, okay? Mike put hundreds of hours in this. I would suspect between regular phone calls and nighttime phone calls, I'm calling Mike, what about this? What about that? What about that? I also get, through Mike, a national forensic DNA examiner by the name of Arthur Young, okay? And this, from Arthur Young, I get a pathologist, who's going to maybe give me some information on the cause of death. Each time I sent the papers out to Mike, to Arthur Young, to Dr. Spreetz, I think his name was, And I have to pay for it, and so each one of them says, we'll do it for free after we read the case. That's how clear it was. That's before they knew about Anthony Jones's statement. Just reading it, they knew there were problems in it. I also got like a fellow who used to be the clerk at the Supreme Court of Pennsylvania. He reads it. He says, I'm in. But that's what it takes. Okay. And think about, quite frankly, just the luck. If I can't get Mike Sanderell, I can't get Arthur Young, I can't get Dr. Spreece, and I can't get Bill Corey, and just what you need to do. So now, right, everybody thinks we're going to win in court. All right, and we don't. We don't win in court. I don't know how to describe how court went, but we had about 5 hearings, and it was clear to me that the judge was no longer interested in his case. That last day of hearing, it was a battle between the judge and it became quite personal. That judge had a bug up him for some reason, and he had a real bug up, and it was to the point where, the other attorneys around me, we were just arguing, and he would say things with so clearly suggesting that I did things unethical, which I didn't. And I would say, stop it. That's the 3rd time you've done that. You either you report me to the board, give me the citation that I violated, whatever it is. You're doing it again. He said, I'm not doing it. I said, you're doing it every time you're talking to me. And it was very personal for Reese. I did find out later about what it was. My gut feeling was at the time, the district attorney and the public defender had spoken to him. And many times later, I did find there was communication that was going on between the public defender and the district attorney, relaying what Mr. Jones, who's going to be their witness in this case, what Mr. Jones is telling the public defender is telling the DA, because Mr. Jones changed his mind again. He changed his mind when he came down to testify. And now he's inside saying, I'm being threatened by Leroy, and Leroy did this. But there's so many ethical problems that happen there. Which is, Jones doesn't know that that's being relayed to the DA. So that's an ethical problem. More importantly, the judge is blocking my entering the confession, the 93-page confession, audio and writing. He's blocking that from coming in. He says it's hearsay. And I don't ever believe it was hearsay, at all. It's what they call a statement against interest. Meaning it's an exception of hearsay. If I make a statement that's contrary to my interest, and his interest was he was up to be resentenced because he was a juvenile who was doing life. So if he lied under that, that would be against his interest. And if he lied on this statement, that would be against his interest. But the judge didn't see it that way. He just was not going to let it in for anything at all. But when I saw those communications between Jones, public defender, and the DA, what bothered me about that is both attorneys invoked the Fifth Amendment on behalf of that fellow, right? There's no Fifth Amendment once they start communicating outside of the attorney. Once the public defender communicated to somebody else, it's no longer Fifth Amendment. But I didn't know that at the time. But it was no doubt in my mind that's what happened. I know that's it's a bold-faced allegation that points fingers at ethical issues. But once I saw that chain going on, that came years later. That came only about 2 years ago, and that came from the Pennsylvania Attorney General's office. And when I got that, I was livid. I called that attorney up, and I was livid. But she had the same feeling I had, which was that was so unethical what happened. But we were working with her now on a conviction integrity section, and she's the lead. And I was ready to go over and punch somebody when I saw that. But I said to her, I'll follow your guidance. It's your case, because that's how when we lose in common pleas court. We then filed an appeal. We had to file an appeal. And again, we're into this system that's taken us all these years. We go and appeal. God knows how many more years we're going to be, and who knows what they're going to decide. In that time period, the state of Pennsylvania, for the first time under Shapiro, who was then the Attorney General, opens up a conviction integrity section. We're the first case in. We're the first case in. I'm going to double down on Dr. Perry again. I only learned how we got to that point, just almost when he came out, and which was, we were here at Manor College because we were just going anywhere we could to shout out, and somebody would listen to us. And so literally, what happened was Jack Stolzheimer was running for DA in Delaware County. He approaches me now, I guess 4 years ago, and says, I'm reading about this case because we had gotten some newspaper articles about it. And he says, I'm interested in that case. Tell me more about it. He had come to a couple of places, like Santorelli, we had him up here, we had him someplace else. He had an interest in the case. It interested him. But and then when he got elected, he said, I'd rather not handle this because I made some comments on the campaign trail that, this case troubles me. And so he gave it to the first case in the Attorney General's office. But when I speak to Dr. Perry, it's only when we're almost a month away from getting the hearing that we're going to get out on, that Jack Stolzheimer, the district attorney, says to me that Jack Stolzheimer worked with Dr. Perry in the DA's office. I knew Dr. Perry in my days in Delaware County. So Jack Stolzheimer says to me when we finally get a hearing and we know we're going to get released, he says to me, you know how that happened? He said, how it came here? He said, because we were here speaking 5 years or so ago, and Dr. Perry heard the case, called Jack Stolzheimer, because Dr. Perry was a DA at the time, and he called a fellow DA, and he says, they both know him. He said, Mike Moore spoken. And he said, there's something about the case that bothers me. So he says to Jack Stolzheimer. And then Jack Stolzheimer looked into it. And that's how we got the ball rolling. And I've had a couple cases, nothing like this case, but a couple convictions overturned. And I tell people that you can sometimes win more outside the courthouse than you can in the courthouse. The courthouse is going to be restrictive, like the 60-day rule, but whoever is inside that courthouse, whether it be a district attorney or a judge, if they look out the window and they see just a mother and a baby arguing that my son or my husband is wrongfully convicted, that means nothing to them. They look out that window and they see 100 people. Well, they are elected officials, and they're conscious of that. And they're conscious that those people are coming from the community. They're speaking a little bit louder than maybe they used to. And that's what happens in this particular case, that it was really more outside the courtroom that was beginning to get inside the courthouse. And so then we had to make a hard decision, which was we had to withdraw the appeal in order to go before the conviction integrity section. And we had to make it, flip the coin and decide, well, we can't go back on the appeal and we go this route. So we made the decision to go this route. And then here we are. And so out comes Leroy. I made it a point, quite frankly, that he be released from the courthouse because I wanted him to walk out the same door that he walked into. It meant so much. And so it was, there are pictures online, I think, somewhere, but it was an impactful day, for lack of a better word. And I'm going to bring Leroy up in a second, but I tell people about this case that, they look at me as the lawyer and, the advocate who had this case. The remarkable thing about this case are these people. These people have been a gift to me, literally a gift to me. I can't tell you, it's hard for me to describe all these people. I would, from the time I met him, like I said, the first time I go home, I'd say to my wife, listen to this. And I call them, quite frankly, holy shit moments. I must have had 15 of them in this case. I'd go home. I'll tell you one, okay? This guy in jail for 40 years. I'm out to prison, and I'm just talking, and he says something about Rosemary. Well, my wife's name's Rosemary, and I don't tell my clients my personal business. And then he said, well, my wife's name Rosemary. He was sitting here, by the way. And I said to him, your wife's name Rosemary? He said, yeah. And I said, you still married? He said, yes. Here she sits today. And I said, she waiting for you? He said, yes. And I said, well, your rosemary is better than my rosemary. And I'll tell you that much. I said, because, and it was time after time, I'd go down and I meet this family. And I'll tell you one other great story. His mother, Alice, this is going to be hard for me. It's that hard for me. I can't look at him. I can't look at it to him. She was a wonderful woman. She was a remarkable woman. And her whole family reflects on her. And I used to tell people when I would travel with her to get some generation of news, I'd say, if you ever want to meet Leroy, because he's in jail, look at her. They were twins. They have the same Southern drawl. They're identical. And they're identical in their personality. But most of his family is that way too. But so we recorded all these stuff, you know, and we're trying to get news. We had a podcast. So I want to record Alice's story. I know, you know, that she came up from North Carolina. And so when I talked to Alice, she was one of 12. She has 11 children of her own. So this is a big family. At Alice's birthday party about 3 years or so ago, immediate family was 100-some people. So when I speak to Alice, and we're going to record her statement, she gives me her history, right? Alice at the time, I think, was 85, 84, 85. She then tells me that her father died, and I forget what year it was, but she said something like 2004. And I was like, that didn't make sense. I thought maybe she's losing it. And then she said to me, he used to say, he said he was 104, but he was really 110. So then I did the math, you know, we're going into over 200 years, you know, if you get, you know, about. So she was a sharecropper, raised in a sharecropper's hut in, as she would say, at Fayetteville, North Carolina. And so I asked her, you know, she was a sharecropper and 12 in a sharecropper's house, whatever you want to call them. So then I said, did you have any grandparents? She said, yeah, my mother, my father's mother. And I said, was she a freed slave? She said, yeah, yes. And so then again, I go home to my rosemary and say, holy shit, listen to this. Alice was in a house with a freed slave. Think about the history of that. Her husband, who was a sharecropper in another farm, the same. He had a grandparent that was a freed slave. And Alice, Leroy will correct me if I'm wrong, but she would bring all these hundreds of nieces and nephews down there. And she would say that in Fayetteville, there was a train station there with a platform. And that's where her grandmother was sold. So think about the history of the woman who, you know, I've always said that this family, and so many, now we're near the end of the story, they really do represent an American story, right? Leroy, he was a sharecropper. He came up at the age of 8 or 9. He was in the fields picking. So they come from, in a direct line, slavery to sharecropping, the Jim Crow, to the Great Migration up north, to working in the factories, right? To kind of being shunned in the factories, to a son wrongfully convicted of murder. That's the history of this family. Having said that, though, not one complaint. Not one complaint. I was with one of them yesterday. He even said we never complain. That all comes from Alice. But not one complaint about we came from slaves. Not one complaint from I was a sharecropper. Not one complaint. Not even one complaint about the wrongful conviction. You know, their faith. They have a faith in God. You know, whatever time I would say something to Leroy about, like he's, you know, like we lost a case today, we lost a motion today, and then, you know, he would say, well, God will be good to me, you know, I know God, you know, and he said to me at one point in time, he said that if I die in prison, it doesn't really bother me, because he said when I meet God, God knows I didn't do it, and you know. And so, which also told me, you know, like I won't even be allowed into the line, you know, of all the lies I've told in court and all that kind of stuff. So this guy's going to be way ahead of me. But so what I would tell, especially the students, that you know, there's a lot to be said for stepping up, even if you lose. there's a lot to be said to step up. Opportunities come our way. And opportunities come our way. And this was a great legal case, certainly, but it really paled in comparison to the people I met along the way and continue to meet along the way. And, people look at me now, I'm a lawyer, but I came from, my mother, when I graduated in Villanova, thought I was so smart I could become a mailman. That was my background. I didn't really like the cold and rain, but so I never met a lawyer in my life till I went to law school. But and so people have an idea of lawyers. I just like to have an idea of whether they may be teachers or nurses. But on your route through life, you'll have opportunities, whatever they may be, to help people. And in the smallest ways or the greatest of ways, and they'll be much more. They'll reward you much more than any job you ever had. And this has been a gift to me. Like I said, not just to win, more so the people I met along the way. So I'm gonna bring Leroy up here so we can cry together. And we'll take questions.
Yeah, thanks everyone for being here. It's a blessing to be free. Y'all got to excuse me because I always tear up. In my last 42 years, I haven't never cried so much. This is a blessing, honor. I just wish that my mother and my other family was here to see it. But thanks to Mike and the team he put together to make this happen for me, it's truly a blessing. And we try to do everything the right way in life, period. Me, myself, people always ask me about my incarceration, those type of things. It's hard. It's really hard. Our justice system need to be fixed because there's a whole lot of me inside of there. And we have to fight hard to make sure our justice system will work for the right people. We know that people do wrong things in life. People have to be punished for what they do in life. But don't punish the innocent ones when you know they're innocent. That's our fight. It's so hard to stand up here and try to explain to y'all what happened to me. This happened to a lot of us. Might not be in this sense, but it do. And we have to keep trying to fight for justice. And I'm glad to say, to see y'all here to witness it, it's a blessing. And I want to thank all of y'all for coming out. Thanks.
Let me ask you a question. I'll tell you something about the system. How many prisons were there in Pennsylvania when you were first incarcerated?
When I got first incarcerated, it was 7 prisons.
How many prisons are there in Pennsylvania today?
35.
So you hear the word mass incarceration. So think about the numbers, right? Think about that number, 7 to 35. And so when you hear the word mass incarceration, it means nothing when we read about it, right? We don't really know what that means. Think about that number. That's a massive number in 40 years. Our population didn't grow that time, but our incarceration rate did. It's massive. And these prisons I go to are massive. And I've read a couple times that they estimate that clearly innocent people run about, they think about, say, 5 to 8%. Some people say, most times will say 8, but no lower than 5. So think about that when they have 100,000 people. So if you were like if a plane crash was pretty good 95% of the time, you wouldn't put up with that, right? But so think about, if you do the number, so it's 8%. Talking tens of thousands of people that they statistically think are innocent. That's a big number, and that's a problem when you have, quite frankly, mass incarceration, right? Right?
Yes, sir.
Right.
Yes, sir.
And what kept you going all these years?
2. First, God, faith, hope, family. Kept me going all the years. with hope, that means everything to all of us. 'Cause without hope, everything else is slow. You know, I always see that we talk about trying to get to heaven. A lot of people try to run to get there. But me, myself, I'm not trying to run. I want to walk to get there so I can last longer. You know what I mean? When I sleep, my sleep be for good. So that's why I want to walk. I don't want to run because I might miss out on something God had for me. So that's why I want to walk to heaven, not run.
And when you were incarcerated, how often would Rosemary call you?
I would call her almost every day.
Every day,
Almost every
46
day.
years.
Yeah, every day. Her, my mom, my sisters, my grandbabies.
Think about that.
You know, just even in prison, sad as it should be, but I wasn't. I was happy. I wasn't happy to being in prison. Don't get that twisted. I wasn't happy being in prison, but I was happy with what I had within and the people I had around me and helping me with the situation. That was happy for me. You know, a lot of people even say to me, did you ever thought you were gonna get out? Or I said, yeah. Yeah, because I never gave up hope. So that's what kept me going for all those years. I sit here and y'all see me, this is real hard for me. I'm always tearing up. Like I said, I ain't teared up this much in 42 years. Even right now, it's even hard. I really never really grieved my mother's death, my father's death, my sister's death, my other people. I really never got to grieve their death. So I guess sometimes I say to myself, this is probably where all the tears come from. But y'all have to excuse me for it. Even now, it's still a blessing to me. So, yeah. Sometimes it's hard though. You know, sometimes it's hard. But I'm glad to be able to come out today and share this story with y'all. I'm hoping that y'all can take this story and share it with someone else for us. Not only for me, but all the rest of the people is innocent locked up in these prisons. Thank y'all.
You have any questions? No? We're done.
I'm going to shout questions and hopefully people will. Has anybody ever said they're sorry from the system? Anybody ever formally said, we made a mistake, we're ashamed, we're sorry?
No, sir. No, sir.
And Mike, I don't know if you want to talk at some point about the mechanics of the final getting out and the compromises that have to happen.
Yeah, I mean, to get out, yeah. It's just such a nightmare, the system. So the Attorney General comes and sees me and says, you know, they have problems with the case, right? They're coming to a conclusion. But now at that point in time, they made it clear they don't believe Jones at all. But their standard for a full exoneration is they need some DNA or some fingerprints. That's what their standard. They're a new office. And so they then say, you know, what we could do is we're going to fully exonerate him for the first, because they actually say in their motion that they don't think that he could be found guilty at all at this point in time. But without a full exoneration, which meant that DNA or fingerprints, that they wanted us to enter a plea of what they call no contest and no low contendere, meaning we're not pleading guilty, or we're not going to contest it. And so therefore, he then got sentenced to the time that he served on the third-degree murder. Now, to show you how the system works again, but you know, and at that point, we just want to get out, right? We're out. That had to be a year and a half ago when they made that decision. And the way it works in the system, the judge who had the case, who we had the problem with, it gets reassigned to him when they file it. Yeah, right. It goes right back to him. And so at that point in time, the Attorney General is clear that this guy should be in jail. You know what I mean? And she and the Deputy Attorney General were in my office, and they see the problems. They see personally where they see an exoneration, but they just, but the new guidelines and standards have these in it. We just can't. We don't have any DNA or a fingerprint issue. And so, so then they want to go to court, and I said to the AG, I said, we should meet with this judge first because you weren't in that courtroom. So she drives all the way from Harrisburg. I set up a meeting. I said, before we file anything, I'm just telling you. So so she drives all the way in from Harrisburg, and the Deputy Attorney General are going to be on a conference call when we go inside. We walk into the judge's office chambers, and then she says, Your Honor, we did this, 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 and we plan to file a petition, and he's cut her off. He said, "File whatever you want. Good luck having any chance in this courtroom. Have a nice day, and have a nice trip back to Harrisburg." That meeting was 2 minutes. And I knew it. And I told him, and I knew it. Now, the only good thing about it was that he was going on his way to a senior judge. As a senior judge, I didn't think he could take the case. And if we could file certain things, they can only sit so many hours a month. So we'd have to complicate the point where when he got into the senior status, that he couldn't take the case because he was going to try and take that case. And so again, we do certain things that we need to do, and that's what takes another year. So I called him. I know it was because I driven up to the prison to tell him. So it was fall, and now and now with the year passes, and I have to tell him, we're stuck. We're just stuck at this point in time. The long and short of it is, quite frankly, again, through the help of the other people, we get to we get to the president judge, and president judge at that point was going to appoint Judge Cardizano, but then he kept it, which is of all the picks I could have had, he'd have been the guy because he'll do whatever but again, he was the president judge, so he couldn't do it until after he steps down in December. So that takes all that time. And at that point, we know what's going to happen. At that point, we have several, what I would say, professional meetings with the judge, between the Attorney General and I. I mean, he has real legal questions and answers that he needs to be answered, because this has never been done before. And certainly never been done in Delaware County. And that judge is concerned, just to show you how complex the system could be. Philadelphia's had a lot of these. Well, 2 of them are before federal court now because they were kind of sloppy in the way they did it. And the reality is, as Judge Kelly would say, so what rule of procedure, or what rule of law, or what law am I following here? What if I cite, what do I cite that I'm granting this motion? Because there isn't nothing. There's no statute for this. There's no rule for this. There's no rule to get this in court. And so they were the right questions, because he was concerned that because he saw that with 2 cases that got into federal court correctly, and say I don't want this coming back. On my lap. And so, but again, that was a much more professional and the right questions and that complex questions that we had to resolve. But he was always going to do the right thing, and that's what happened. And so that's how we got to that point, so.
I just wanted to ask, and I know you mentioned this before, you had your patient, your family and all that, but just, I guess on a human being level, how did you not come out? So how did you deal with anger? I just feel like I would come out so angry on so many different levels of different reasons. Was that all your faith, or how did you just? It's amazing.
I know.
Yeah.
My upbringing, real strong faith in family values and everything. Mother, it's such a blessing to, with all the similar, like it's 11 of us, 13 with mother and father, and mother always try to give us the right tool to use for our faith and for society, and always try to do the right thing. And I kept that with me all my life. So anger, never crossed my mind. I have had so many questions about me being in prison, because prison life it's another society. So within prison, You got all these men, everybody with problems. And a lot of guys used to ask me all the time, because I try to be, even in prison, you try to mentor guys, younger ones that coming in. And few guys ask me, plain, if this guy that got you in here, would you come in this prison where you are at, what would you do to him? You understand? I said, I wouldn't do nothing to him. Why? Why would I do something to him? Wouldn't that make me just as much as him? If he did that to someone else, why would I do it to him? That's not the faith in the guy I come from. So no, I never had even right now, I don't have no bad feelings about him or any towards bad feelings about him. But he still had to be punished for what he did. Even though he did this to me, he still got to answer to God for all he did, even to me, even to my family, because he hurted them too. He didn't only hurt me, he hurted my son, he hurted my wife, my mother. No, I don't have no type of ill feelings against him because he had to deal with God. I'm not the judge of him, God is. So that's always been my faith with that.
Yeah. I think you would have gotten a call from you that wasn't, you didn't get out or it didn't go right at the time, that it would have been.
It's a blessing that I was able to meet Mike. Not only I gained an attorney, a best friend, a real good friend. And I'm gonna go farther to say, not even a friend anymore. He's my big brother. And definitely. Yeah.
You want to talk a little bit about what life is like now that you're out? You hear talk about a cell phone guy.
Oh, man, that's true. I'm still trying to learn that one. The babies.
How big is your TV?
75 inches.
I said, when he cut out, he said, I got 75-inch TV. I said, is that bigger than the cell you were in?
Well, the cell I was in,
Yeah.
big as a bathroom. No exaggeration.
Yeah.
That's the cell. The cell I was in, big as a bathroom with 2 people living in it. So can you imagine?
The law requires 9 by 6.
But that somewhere around. In my cell, I can actually touch both walls. So that's how you live. You have to get used to it, being close and by, respect. Sometimes guys go straight, being that close environment, things happen. Guys get killed in the cells. Some guys can't live with others. So it's so much to go on in this prison when people think prison life, oh, they got 3 meals in the cot. Well, in prison, guess what? You got bills. You have to pay bills, nothing free. Oh, they watch cable and all that, but guess what? They have to pay for that to watch it. It's not free. So it's another society, but different rules, so.
And don't you have to pay for your TV?
Oh, yeah.
How much do you pay for the TV?
A TV in prison,
About this big, right?
it's a nice 15-inch.
Yeah, 15.
Nice 15 inch. But here's the thing with that. You buy a TV from prison, that same TV, I can get for maybe less than $80, $200 and some for that TV. And then they take the antenna away from you to make you buy the antenna, costs another $5. So they get you all the way around the board. So it's not nothing like even in there. The things kind of rough.
When did you figure out the cell phone?
Oh man, I still can't figure it out.
I get calls, and I can hear a voice somewhere, and then Rosemary comes on the phone saying, like, Mike, and he's somewhere out there. I don't know if he's across the street or whatever.
Well, I'm trying to
get it. Are you getting it?
I'm trying to. I'm still trying. That's how I had to tell her the other day. Is the call coming in, a message or something? She looked. She said, yeah. I said, I don't know how. See, when I left, we didn't have cell phones and all. I'm used to the dial tone, but We had pages. Pages, remember the pages? That's what we had. The amount of page, you gotta go make a phone call.
For, you know, we're thinking about what advice you could give to future examiners in terms of coming back into society, because I feel like that, depending on what decade you enter back in, it's difficult in itself, but like, what advice would you give them? Because I feel like I don't think there's a lot of preparation unless you have people around you that do that. But because of someone who didn't have the family that you had, didn't have the brother and lawyer that you had, what would be 3 things you would tell them that they need to do to really reacclimate back into society?
First I would say, probably we have to stay focused on what we are trying to do. If you're trying to get out, you can't get out if you're in prison doing other things to keep you in. So when you do get out, we try to, even inside, we try to prepare the younger people that's incarcerated, because we do most likely raise them in prison. So when the younger ones come in, most likely they're gonna get back out, and we try to give them the right things to do to try to make it back in society, and give them a percentage of life in general. You know what it takes to make it out in society. You have to get up, work, and respect people, and try to do all the things you're supposed to do to make it in society. And the main thing is try to stay away from this. It's the main thing, because these buildings that we're in, they're not going nowhere. They ain't going nowhere. They're not blowing down. You have to, you know what I mean, dynamite them down. So guys that keep coming, I don't see so many in and out, in and out, in and out, because they don't have no guidance out in society. And society don't fail a lot of them too. And that's what's happening in our society. A lot of them, you know, you try to reach as much as you can and give them the right things to carry in their life. So that's all we can do.
It's scary.
Yes.
And literally 5 times prisons were built in the period. And mentioned that our population is increasing. So basically, what were people going to prison for was not.
Well, I haven't been in the system that long. It's primarily drugs. And when I say that, the war on drugs has done a lot of things wrong, right? But what it's really done, if you really look at it, up until a few years ago, there was mandatory laws of 5 years, 2 years for marijuana. That puts a lot of people in jail for a long, long time. And prisons and all of us related into the criminal justice system, it's a job fair for us. To be perfectly frank. There's, these prisons are massive. Like SEI Forest, where I've been to a lot of prisons, they're not small prisons. They're housing tens of thousands of people. And SEI Laurel Highlands, which is on the turnpike, that's for older prisoners, right?
See,
right? Yeah.
this guy gets.
They have people in there that have Alzheimer's. They don't even know they're in prison anymore. Well, they don't know. Yeah, and a lot of people come to the end and they don't have anybody to come to when they come out. But the war on drugs is my personal opinion, has caused, this big problem that we have in mass incarceration. I watched it forever. You'd have people coming in, marijuana cases, by the hundreds. And I don't, I know the number somewhere, but the disproportionate amount of incarceration among people of color is massive because it was easy pickings, quite frankly. And it was drugs, mostly again drugs. You could have a case. Give an example. You couldn't be in a school or playground. That was immediate 2 years in prison, right? So I had a case one time in down the city of Chester, and they were shooting on a telephone pole into a Wawa milk carton basket, right? Because they cut out the bottom. The court declared that a playground. My guy was doing 2 years. That's how you get mass incarceration. You know, and then what you would do with those people who had marijuana on, just marijuana. Give me somebody else who has it, because what am I doing? Oh, I'm getting hired, so I'm making money. Police officers are overtime. The system is making a lot of money. And when you talk about how do you shut these prisons, okay, prisons are like Navy bases or Army bases. Try to shut Huntington or where he was, up in Dallas. Whatever politician moved to get that prison built there, they have all the jobs. So to try to go back to say just 15 prisons, you wait to see the political battles that go on, because whether it's Huntington or SCI Forest or any of these places, they're going to fight like hell.
Yeah.
Kids for cash, that's what they were sending you cases, kids do not have them, they were sending to facilities, and it was, they wanted to make.
That was Lycoming County.
Yeah.
Yeah. Exactly right. The judge were involved in
The
that.
judge was
Judges always sitting on the.
the judge was taking the cases, and they were convicting and sending the children to these placements so they can get the money.
Yeah.
The judges and this attorney, everybody else is getting the money for sending the children away. And this is our society.
Yeah.
Mr. Evans, for veterans, you were arrested, right?
Yes, I went to the Navy, but I ain't stayed long because I had a medical discharge.
But you had an honorable discharge.
Yes, honorable discharge, yes, sir.
And in prison, did you have a lot of veterans who were also prisoners?
Yes, it's a whole lot.
That's one of the things which is amazing. A lot of the prison guards and prison staff are veterans.
Oh, veterans, yes.
Did they treat you with respect for being a veteran? Did you get
Yes, sir.
respect for that,
Yes, sir.
even as a prisoner?
Yes, sir. They always did.
In the prison, when I mean, the last 7 years you were in there, you knew there were people outside who were powerful people who thought you were innocent and were trying to get you out. Did the prison know that too?
Yes. Well, sometimes through where we be at a lot of the time, the news is different, because we don't get the Philadelphia news, but you can hear things. Then with the social media now, they're going to read and see. And yes, that's how some of it happens.
But did anything change in how you were treated during that period? I mean,
Well, quite frankly, honestly, it's not, everyone can't say this. I would never treat it harshly in prison because what I gave off, respect to everyone, guards, inmates, everyone with the respect. And that's why it wasn't so hard for me. And so, yes, they gave a lot of respect,
Great. No.
How does prison change?
I tell you this, it make you enjoy society more. Your freedom, because even sometime now, I come out the door and I just stand out and I just look. Because some places, some jail we at, we don't get a chance to see that, trees, because you got walls, it's straight up. So all you can see is the sky. So being out to take a walk, my wife tell me all the time, when we go somewhere and we be out, I just start walking. Where you going? I said, I'm just walking.
When he was being released, right, so he's in the lockup in the Delaware County Courthouse. And so my son, who's a lawyer, and so we're going to take him to the front door. But as we're walking, and he's behind us, right? He's behind us, and he's walking like this, right? Brian says to him, Leroy, you don't have shackles on anymore. Step up. And he had that prison walk. He had a prison walk.
Yeah.
Said, no, take a long step. You're free.
They can't go nowhere. You can't go nowhere. When you travel, you're always shackled, and you're sitting in a car, and you handcuffed, and guess what? You ain't handcuffed like this, you handcuffed like this. So this is the box you change to it, and this how you travel, shackled. But wherever you go, you like this until you get to where you're going. And you be trying to get some type of relief, but that's traveling, man. That,
But how do you feel about all of them? Just like you didn't really deserve it.
yeah. The same way I feel about myself, honestly. I feel for those brothers and sisters because it's women too, it's being locked up innocently. So I feel and I pray every day, I still do. Hopefully that, just like myself, they can find some type of help to gain their release. So a lot of us are doing license. They give us a license because they want you to die in prison. So now they're doing the commutation. Commutation is where you have to get the governor, you got to go through all these challenges to get the governor to sign for you to come out. And that's not promised to you. So you need 5 people to vote in your favor. And most of the time, they don't. So to file for commutation to try to get out, take about a couple of years. If they turn you down and you file again, take you another couple of years. So you already got 40-something years in. So there you go. And another thing Mike mentioned about time in court, when you're found guilty in court and you're being sentenced, you got 1 year after your sentence, 1, to file your appeal. If you don't file your appeal within that year, you're done. Innocent or not, you're done. That's because of time bar. They got this called time bar. Once you time bar, it's over. It took me all those years to get untime bar. The only reason why is because of new discovered evidence.
DNA, yeah.
DNA. If it wasn't for that, guess what? I wouldn't be standing here.
Yeah, if it didn't have that, the petition would have just been rejected. It's out of time.
It's out of time.
Doesn't make it.
Can't do-
You could attach a statement of Jones saying, here's how it happened. It's out of time.
It don't matter.
Yeah, good.
You could come up to right now and say, listen, I committed that crime. He didn't do it. I did it. Blase, blase. Don't matter. You were convicted.
What was it that made you first reach out to Mike in that first meeting?
Well, when I filed for DNA testing, they brought me down to court from where I was at Dallas. And I was in the process, because they had gave me a court-appointed lawyer. And I was in the process of trying to, because I've been through so many other lawyers that really didn't, I'm talking about court-appointed lawyers. Nobody's gonna fight for you, really, they just not. They ain't gonna put the effort in to help you fight your case or to get out. They may do something, may satisfy you. I met Mike when I came down to court, where I was trying to see can I get lawyers, because I couldn't take the chance of going back and trying to get these lawyers that ain't really interested in the case or trying to gain my freedom, fight for me. So when I go to court with my family, I asked my family members to try to help me get a lawyer, because I wanted the best lawyer in Delaware County. And I was told Mike Malloy and Mark Munch. So I said, well, I'm in the process of trying to get one of the two. So Mark Munch sent,
Is he?
yeah, he sent the guy out. To
Oh,
see
George.
George,
Yeah,
right.
that's his paralegal. Yeah, right. Yeah, right.
Sent the guy out to see me. And Mike was sitting over waiting for another client. So I was sitting there and the guard was in front of me, lady guard. I knew he was, I probably looked at him and said, you can tell lawyers So I said, yeah,
I don't know if that's a compliment.
yeah, you can tell lawyer. So I said to her, the guard, I said, excuse me, miss. I said, that's the lawyer sitting right there. She said, yes. She said, that's Mike Malloy. I said, ooh, I said, can I speak to him? Because I'm in the process of trying to hire him. And she said, sure. And I went over there and spoke to Mike. But and this is the honest truth. When I approached Mike and reached out and touched Mike, something then, I felt something. And I told him then, I think you're the one.
Let me add to that one more thing, was to show you when I always said how it happened.
Yeah.
When the Attorney General got involved, at the very beginning, they had to go and meet with him and interview him, right? And so they had a state trooper investigator with him. And they asked me, I have a right to be there as my client. And Lisa, the AG says, don't expect much. When we looked at the file, and so she said, but you're welcome to come sit in. She said, I think we'll be 15 minutes or so. So I drive up to SCI Dallas and I go. And the long short of it is the interview goes over an hour or so, right? And I'm looking at the investigator the whole time, and his head's like, he's not getting this at all, right? But most importantly, just like what I said when I met him, when we walked out, Lisa says to me, well, that's not who I expected. And I said to her, you're having the same reaction I had. I said, I said, I was never going to tell you. I said, you had the same reaction I had. There's something not right once you meet him. And she said, well, I'm just telling you, it's not what I thought. She was going to go up there, do her little interview, and was done. She was over an hour, and it was like, it doesn't matter. You just meet him, and you're like, and she had the same, and then that really what picked up the pace of their investigation.
A lot of people today are disconnected with or not interested in their faith. What is it? Is there something that draws you to yours? And imagine that while you were incarcerated, that you had moments for really deep thinking about your faith. I wonder if you can talk about those things.
You always will have deep thoughts about your faith. Even myself, even with the upbringing of them. I'll tell you about a situation that happened to me in the visit room one day. My mother and all of us were sitting in the visit room, and we were just talking in general, and we were talking about everything. So I got to ask him about, like, why me? Why all this happened to me? I ain't never did nothing to no one to deserve this. Why? Why me? Why me? Out of all the things, my mother looked at me and said to me, why not you? Stung me. Like, huh? My mother saying this? She said, yes. Why not you? I was kind of gasped like, huh? What's going on? She said, why not? She said, yeah, why not you? So I wanted to explain. She said, you don't know what God has plans for you. So quit saying, why not you? Why me? Why me? Why not you? You know what God got planned for you. And ever since that day, my faith has been that strong, always. And she said another thing to me, not directly to me, but my mother testified in court. Character witness, which everyone should know about the character witness. And she said to me, she said to the court, and that goes carries with me all the time. She said, today, she in the courtroom, sitting on the stand, she said, today, I'm willing to put my head on the chopping block because I know my son ain't do it. Nothing else mattered to me after that. Nothing. Really.
Just, we have, when we go through this, we had a website created, and there's 2 websites, and on them, you can hear the story of Alice as she tells her story. It's again, she passed in 2021 or 22? 2021.
21.
So she died of COVID. Yeah, I know. I can't tell you how angry I was when I got that news. Yeah, she died of COVID. nothing health, no health problems, but COVID killed her. But listen to her story. It's a great story. You can actually listen to Anthony Jones's recording when he tells how the murder happened. But most importantly, if you listen to Alice's story, it's we recorded it in a studio, so it's even pretty good quality. She breaks at the end for the first time I ever met her. Yeah, I won't even say it because I can't say it, but she broke. Thank you.
Thank you.
What is the website that you're?
There's two. I forget which one. One's called thestoryofinnocence.com and the other one is a Justice for Leroy.
Oh.
Yeah. Yeah, they both should be on there.
They're both easy to find. I sent them for my students this morning.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah, okay.
Yeah. Listen to Alice though. It's worth it. She's inspirational.
So what are your plans?
The new Lakers game.
What are you doing with yourself, young man?
Still trying to keep up with it, keeping up and enjoy life and the freedom of it. You know what I mean? I got some grandbaby, great grandbabies I wanna, spoil and do all the things grandparents do. So I got a lot in front of me for that. And another thing, people always think that when you're in prison and you're wrongly convicted and all these things happen to, they think that when you get out, that you get compensated for the wrong they had caused you. But guess what? They don't.
He did have his first beer
I did.
with a nun.
With a nun. I never, yeah, I never drink or drug anything in my life. And so Sister Sheila is a real sister nun, and then she was telling me about the beer, and we was out. So I told her one time, I said, we were in prison, and she said, she drink beer. I said, you know what? I said, if I ever get out, I'm gonna have a beer with you.
Holy water.
Holy water. Anyway, it was a Guinness.
And
It was a Guinness, but yeah.
let's have a beer with you. And me and her, we went out and I had a beer with her.
Thank you so much.
I appreciate y'all for coming out and thank y'all for inviting me. Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank y'all. Thank everyone.
Thank you again.
From the kids, if they want to come up and talk.
Yes.
Guys, if anybody wants to come up and chat, he's going to take talk questions and stuff. We are shy for some reason. I don't know what that is. But, are you doing a part?